First of all, I just want you all to know I am sitting in my car, but I am sitting. I'm not driving. I'm not going anywhere. So I wanted to get that right off the bat. But I had a really great conversation with a very dear friend yesterday about basically coping mechanisms in times of stress. Obviously, that conversation was triggered by the COVID-19 virus. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about my story, about my coping mechanisms in the past and how I've overcome some of those and what you can do to help cope with the stress during this season. So a lot of you know that my story involves an eating disorder. What most of you probably don't know is that I actually have 2 eating disorders, one of which started before I was even 2 years old. So when we first moved to the United States from Germany, I was about 1.5 years old. And for the first 6 months that we were here, my parents could not get me to eat anything besides drink yogurt. And when I did finally start eating again, I was very, very picky, very particular, very just restrictive with the foods that I would eat. And what I have found out through therapy is I actually have an eating disorder called avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or ARFID. So if you've ever had a meal with me and you notice me not taking everything that was on the table or picking around things, it's because there are just a lot of things that I do not eat. It's interesting because for most people, 8 to 12 encounters with a new food is enough for them to be used to it or tolerate it. For somebody with ARFID, it takes about 50 to 80 encounters with a new food. I don't have the patience to try a new food 50 times. So I am working with my therapist on food exposures. But what happened with this eating disorder is that eventually it turned into full-blown bulimia. So my senior year of high school, it was the week before regionals for marching band. I was in marching band. And if you know anything about marching band regionals, big deal, because the next step is going to state. And I know that there's different ones now, semi-state and all these others, but back when I did marching band, it was regionals and then state. And I remember just sitting, having this conversation with my mom, breaking down and just saying, I don't even care at this point if we go to state. I just need to be done, because I was so overwhelmed. It was my senior year. I was working part-time with all the homework, applying for scholarships, marching band. It just felt so overwhelming. And what I did to start coping with that is I started making myself throw up. I would eat and I would throw up. It was this it became a coping mechanism. It was something that I had control over. I thought I had control over. Eating disorders are very much an illusion of control. And it's interesting as I look back and I kind of see the different times in my life when I had relapses. It was my senior year of nursing school. If you have, college is stressful in itself. Nursing school, very stressful. Senior year, it's your capstone year. You're trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I was also planning a wedding and Michael was deployed in Baghdad. So, again, I turned to that binging and purging to cope. The next time I can really think of when I had another relapse would have been, I had a really stressful job. I had taken a supervisory position that I probably should not have taken. I was working for a very, very abusive boss and working some really long, gruesome hours, not seeing my family. And so again, I was just using that eating and throwing up as a way to, part coping mechanism, part physical release of this emotional stress and pain. And then the most recent time would have been in 2018 when we were going through the flood. That was probably my most significant relapse, where I look at and I see that I had really lost control, where I thought this was my thing that I could control, my eating disorder. I can control what I'm eating. I can control, what I'm throwing up. I wasn't controlling what I was eating, and I was throwing up everything that I was eating. But if you notice a theme through all of those, it was always a high stress time that I was using this overeating, this binging, and this throwing up to really cope with it. And I think a lot of people are really seeing that in this time of stress and the unknown and chaos and just feeling unsure of what's going on around them. You maybe have lost a job, you might be laid off, your kids are home now and you don't know how to cope with them being home, you're isolated. There are so many factors that go on, and people are turning to old coping mechanisms to be able to cope. I mean, we look at alcohol sales, I think they're up like 55% right now. So people who maybe were in recovery from alcoholism are finding themselves back in the bottle. People who maybe they had a drink to kick back every once in a while are finding that they need more drinks to kick back more than every once in a while. Cigarettes, marijuana, other drugs, cutting, eating disorders, restricting, overeating. These are all things that people are doing to try to cope with the stress that they're dealing with. But the problem is we really don't have the control that we think we do in the middle of that eating disorder, that addiction, that vice, you know, whether it's food or it's drugs, whether it's alcohol. You know, we really don't have the control that we thought we did. And so for me, I have had to, you know, one way I've gotten my binge eating under control, and it's something that you can absolutely use, whether it's eating, whether it's drinking, whatever it might be. I practice mindfulness with my eating. And so if I'm getting ready to eat something, I stop and I check in with myself. And I, on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm rating myself. How hungry am I? 0 is starving. 10 is I'm miserable and full. So I'm checking in with myself. And then I am, before I'm done eating, I don't want to do this, you know, after I'm done eating, but before I'm done eating, I'm checking in with myself again. Okay, how hungry am I? You know, do I still feel hungry or am I full? Especially if eating is a coping mechanism for you in this season, that mindfulness can be a really, really great way to be able to just have that control over it. If you are a follower of Jesus Christ or you have another faith belief, this is a really great time to go to your sacred scriptures. And okay, what does my scripture say about whatever I'm dealing with? Obviously, there's some things that might be not be specific to the Bible, but, or, you know, whatever holy book you read, but especially for us as Christians, you know, the Bible talks about, you know, the fruit of the Spirit, and one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. And how can we be mindful enough to have that control in this situation? Prayer is another great way that you can cope. It refocuses your mind. It takes your mind off of what is that thing that I am wanting to go after, that drink, that cigarette, that joint, that cupcake, whatever it is. Of, okay, this is pulling my mind and distracting my mind. Worship music is another great way to do that. Honestly, any music. For me, I have created coping cards. Coping cards are a really great thing to use, and music is big on my coping cards. So what a coping card is on one side, I have my behavior, for lack of a better word. And so that might be that I notice that I'm getting really agitated and angry, and I'm getting short with the people around me. Okay, what do I do to combat that? So for me, it is worship music is a huge one, because I'm moving my attitude from myself and selfishness and anger. I'm moving it to an attitude of praise and of gratitude, and I'm focusing my attention on God. Sometimes my coping mechanism is other music. I've got some power ballads that I love. I love to be able to sing out. Fight song is a huge one for me. Because fight song is really this is my fight song, take back my life song. And just even declaring that over yourself, like, I am going to take back control over what I feel like is controlling me. So music, but then those coping cards. And maybe music isn't for you, but what is something that you could do as you notice, like, I'm feeling this stressed out behavior in me and I really, really want to drink, or I really, really want a cigarette, or I really, really need those drugs or that, cookies. What are the things I can do to distract myself? Maybe you play an instrument and you can go sit down at your piano or with whatever instrument that you play. Maybe you have another hobby or craft that you enjoy, reading, crocheting, knitting, needlework, painting. Painting has been a big one for me in my recovery, of just being able to do some drawing, doing some painting of what's going on up here, what's going on here, and getting it out on paper and drawing some pictures. I have drawn a personification of my eating disorder. She's dangerously beautiful and awful. I have drawn a personification of myself as a warrior fighting the eating disorder. I have drawn a parallel, a side-by-side of what my eating disorder promised me versus what my eating disorder gave me. And you could do the same thing with whatever vice you're dealing with. What did your addiction promise you versus what your addiction gave you? In eating disorder, it promised me control. It did not give me control. It promised me roots. It did not give me roots. It set me on fire. It promised me freedom, and really it kept me in chains. And so just being able to draw that out of what that disorder, that addiction, that coping mechanism, drawing out or painting what that has done to you. These are all ways that you can be coping. And just, again, with those coping cards, one side I've got my behavior written down. The other side is what I'm going to do to combat that. I suggest putting 3 things down. One thing, you may get into that one thing and you're like, this is not working. So put 3 things down. Okay, if thing 1 doesn't work, then we're going to go to thing 2. If thing 2 doesn't work, we're going to go on to thing 3. But just in that, be practicing that mindfulness of, okay, on that scale of 0 to 10, my anger is at an 8. Why is my anger at an 8? What can I do to get my anger down to a 2 or a 0, hopefully? My stress level is at a 9 right now. What can I do to get my stress level down? And just having those things. And the great thing about, you may think like, oh, I've got my plan up here in my mind, but having it written down really solidifies it. And it puts it right there in front of you. So there's not really that excuse. One way I've done it, and one app that I highly, highly recommend, it's called the Virtual Hope Box. You can find it on Android as well as iOS. And I created virtual coping cards in there, but it also has different sections. So it's got a remind me section, and that has pictures of me with my favorite people. And it's just reminding me of the blessings that I have. It has a distract me. And so it's Sudoku, it's word searches, Mahjong. And so it's got these great, games to just distract. It has a center me, where it has guided visualization and meditation. So that is called Virtual Hope Box. I highly recommend it, especially in this season. If you find yourself really struggling with how to cope, be gracious with yourself too, though. Be aware. I mean, you look at this and you're like, oh, I just can't get control of my eating, or, oh my goodness, I haven't had a drink in 5 years and here I'm drinking again. Name it, recognize it. This is how I'm coping with stress. This is what I'm going to do to stop using this to cope with stress, and give yourself grace in that. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. But I guess I just wanted you all to understand, like, this is where this is coming from. Our bodies and our minds, we are bent toward survival. So the things that your body and your mind are doing right now are an attempt to cope and survive. What that means is, this is a really terrible time to decide you're going to lose weight. I don't mean to be discouraging, and I'm not telling you that to tell you to, don't do that workout, or don't, eat that, or don't. But just recognize that as your body is in survival mode, surviving does not include losing weight. This is such a high stress time in our country, in our world. And our minds and bodies are like, we don't know what's coming next, and we're just trying to survive this. there are things that your body will not do in survival mode. You will not lose weight. So just be mindful of what you are and are not doing. Exercise is a really great coping mechanism. I didn't mention that, but I've started a new workout routine, not with the goal of weight loss, but just with the goal of bettering and strengthening myself. So I don't see any of this to tell you, like, don't work out. Working out is a great way. Yoga is a wonderful way to center yourself, to become very mindful. Working your body is a great thing to do, but please recognize, just like bears pack on the fat before winter, because winter is a very harsh and traumatic season, bears pack on the fat so they can survive. You may find in this season that you are not losing the weight that you wanted to lose. You may not be accomplishing all of those goals that you wanted to accomplish, but be gracious with yourself in that and understand that there's a reason. Your body, your mind, they are just trying to protect you right now and to help you survive. So give yourself grace, give yourself understanding, be loving towards yourself, take care of yourself. If you are finding that you are using unhealthy coping mechanisms, find some ways to divert from that, to replace those with healthy coping mechanisms. Find a friend to reach out to. I know social isolation is so hard right now, but find somebody that you can reach out to be a support to you, who will check in with you, that you can go to for some accountability. If you need somebody to talk to, I'm here. You can, send me Facebook Messenger message. If you've got my cell phone, please don't hesitate to text message me. If I can be a support to you, if I can be a help to you, I would love to do that. But again, find healthy ways to cope, friends.